Hey everyone! Here are a few tips to help guide you as you're doing your studying for the second midterm. First of all, it should come as no surprise that this entire midterm will be built around our understanding of recursion and recursive data structures. Remember that programming with recursion really involves a different way of thinking about problem solving. And so how you should be approaching each recursive problem is by first trying to figure out the recursive structure of the problem in English, not in code. So if I give you a problem like find the size of a tree, then your first step should be to figure out how the size of a tree relates to the sizes of all of its subtrees. Sometimes the recursive structure will be very obvious, and sometimes it'll require a bit of thinking. But in either case, this is thinking that you really should do before writing your code. And remember, after you've written your code and you're debugging it, you should not be trying to have a mental model of the call stack for your recursive functions. In order to verify that your program is correct, you should focus on two things: making sure you've handled all the correct base cases, and making sure that your recursive thinking is correct. That is, making sure that if the recursive call returns the right thing or does the right thing, then you're using that action correctly, or you're using that return value correctly. Because the problem with your recursive part will never be that the recursive call returns the wrong thing. That will never be the problem. The problem will be that even if it returns the right thing, you're not using it in the right way. Trying to trace through each of the recursive calls is really a distraction from a larger problem. One particular common mistake that students make with these recursive calls is they just make the recursive call and then don't do anything with the results. This is particularly harmful when your recursive function is a non-mutating one. That is, it doesn't change the state of any object. Instead, all it does is returns a value. So I've seen a lot of students just write a recursive call, have it return a value, and then disappear into thin air. Make sure that if you have a recursive function and you want to keep the value, then you actually need to save it. Say like x equals, and then use it later on. Please keep in mind that this warning really is only relevant when you care about what the recursive call returns. If you don't, for example, in a purely mutating method that doesn't return anything, then this warning need not apply. And that's why it's especially important that you have a firm idea in your head of when a method is mutating and when it's not mutating. Whether a method is mutating or not is actually one of its most important characteristics. And finally, just a general tip: know your data structures. You're given the constructors on the cheat sheet, but chances are that won't be good enough for the midterm. You really want to know them inside and out. How to recursively go through a linked list rec. How to loop through the subtrees of a tree. And how to take advantage of the BST property in a binary search tree so that you don't need to make a bunch of redundant function calls. And this actually brings me to what's on the midterm. So there's going to be 4 questions. There's going to be 1 short answer question, and then 1 programming question related to each of the 3 main data structures we looked at. Each of the programming questions will be pretty similar to questions I've asked you to do in the labs and exercises. How best to study for this midterm? 1, make sure you know all your definitions. Make sure you know what the difference between a general tree and a binary tree is. Make sure you know what the difference between a tree and a linked list rec is. Make sure you know how to define a binary search tree. And 2, make sure you can write lots and lots of different functions which operate on each of these 3 data structures. And here's one more tip for you. To get a good feel for the atmosphere of the midterm, try writing your code on paper first before typing it into the computer. So that's all. Have a great day.